Hello and welcome back to Advanced Server-Side Technologies. In this session I want to focus on the database model. The aims of the session are to review the Saltburn Properties database model. So we'll look at an ERD diagram, that stands for Entity Relationship Diagram. Within a diagram we'll look at the relationships and why these are actually critical in using the YE-G tool. Once we've had a look at that, we will go on to look at the need to adapt and extend the existing database model and have an activity that you can actually carry out for that adaptation. As I mentioned in a previous session, Saltburn Properties will be the focus throughout the lecture and practical guide series. With that, we'll be looking at the YE installation and configuration, but importantly recognizing the fact that we have to have a correct database model set up before we actually build the rest of the application. So that includes using the G tool to build the CRUD. CRUD stands for Create, Read, Update and Delete. These are the things that you get out of the box using YE and using the G tool, but only once you have a correct database model. We're also going to be looking at later on web service APIs and the use of those in mobile application development. And we're also going to be looking at building an admin dashboard using the G tool. We'll look at security and how to optimize your PHP, and then really the rest of the lectures and practicals will be focused on the in-course assessment. There's two website examples that you can have a look at after the lecture. These are class leaders. Rightmove has been around quite a while now, around about 10 years or more. Zoopla is a new market entrant. Interesting, the approach to the development of the website is slightly different in both. Both have website presence and also mobile apps. You can have a look at that after this session. I also have a guide number 2 to look at. Let's just revisit that and have a look at guide 2. So guide 2 is all about the data modeling aspect. So if you have a look at this, there is a background on the client briefing in terms of the functional requirements, and importantly how these then translate into the model itself. So that's the focus of practical guide number 2. As each of the practical guides has a forum as well, a discussion forum, you can access the discussion forum, and if you have any issues with the model, any questions, please start the discussion and hopefully myself or other peers in the group will answer your questions. So let's just go and have a look at the database model. So if you remember in the last session we looked at the outline requirements. We broke those down to functional and non-functional, and these were the representations of the functional requirements. In essence, this is the data that we need to capture, store, but importantly return to various views inside our web application and also the web services. Let's start to look at users, remind ourselves what the users table looks like. So we need a method of storing a number of different users. As each new user goes into the table, we want to count that, and we use an ID for that. So user's ID, it's an integer and it has to be unique, so we define that as a primary key. We want to store the first name, the last name, the email, the password and account type as well. Everything except for account type is a varchar, and we can define the character length for that as well. So that's our users table. Next, let's have a look at properties. So this is the properties table. It stores the information, the data about the property. Quite simple for our practical guide series, but likewise we need to store a unique number for the particular property. So we store that as an ID, properties ID, integer, primary key. Likewise, the price is an integer, and then the other things, other columns are address 1, address 2, and address 3, the address line 1, address line 2, address line 3, varchar, the postcode, and the description. Description is going to be text. Text is unlimited characters, whereas varchar you can limit them to specific characters. Vendor's ID and user's ID. These are our foreign keys. These are our relationships back to the relevant table's primary key. So if we look at the user's ID, we have a relationship back to the user's ID. Look at vendors for a second. So vendors, that's the person selling the house. We have again vendor's ID, integer, primary key. We have the first name, last name, email, the address line 1, 2 and 3, and postcode. So quite simple. And obviously that's charting back to the properties. That's a relationship back. So we know which property is owned by which vendor. We know that because we got a unique ID mapped as a foreign key back to vendors table. Next up is the images table. So we want to be able to store a number of different images, not just one. So it's a one-to-many relationship between the properties and the images table. So likewise, we've got images ID defined as integer, primary key. We have the properties ID inside of images, and that's so we can understand the relationship between a particular property and the image that is stored for that property. So this provides us with the ability to store not just one, not just two, but an unlimited amount of images per property, because we can trace back the owner in effect of the image. Okay, so the next two columns we have IMG thumb and IMG full. IMG thumb stands for thumbnail. It's a small image. IMG full is a full resolution image of the property. Alt, that's the alternative text that we can inject back into the view if we wanted to. Again, that would be information about the property. So the images, we have a one-to-many relationship. The vendors, between vendors and properties, that's again a one-to-many relationship, and the users as well, that's a one-to-many relationship between the two. What I would like to do in the next couple of minutes is just see how this is actually represented in Yi. So I'd like to open up Saltburn Properties 2 on the open source web server and just have a look at that. And we're going to use the G tool, and we're going to use something called an ORM. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper and Active Record. The G tool enables you to, once you have the database model set up, automatically or auto code generate your database model. So what that does is, once you have your database connection, it has an understanding of your database and the tables it contains. Once you are using G, you can actually create the model. the controllers, and the views that represent the database tables and obviously the relationships between them. So the G tool actually maps the tables, their structure, and converts them into classes with objects. You can then use the active record to program against these actual methods. So for example, if you want to select all of a particular table in a particular database, no need to write SQL to do that. You just simply write a function that selects on a particular table and returns the data in a certain format. The benefit of that is that the SQL is hidden from the user, well, from the programmer, and therefore hidden from the user. The huge benefit of that would be it reduces the security vulnerabilities that your application might exhibit. So for example, one of the common security vulnerabilities is the ability to inject SQL to manipulate the database. Because you're not dealing with SQL, it's impossible to manipulate the database from the front end of your website. So it's a huge benefit in terms of security. If you would like to have a look at a model, once you have produced the database itself and the relationships between the tables, and you've gone to use G, you've created the classes, the models, the controllers and the views, go and have a look at the following directory: protected, models, properties.php. What if you need to make a change? Now this is quite common. This cropped up a number of different times in my development when I was actually using Yi in a live application, and that's to do with the iterative nature of development. You'll get to a point where you need to revisit the database, perhaps change a column in a single database table, or even add a brand new table. Well, there is a process that you need to go through to ensure that's as smooth as possible. The first is to back up your existing model. So what I would do in phpMyAdmin would be to export your entire database, or if you want to just select particular tables, but definitely back up what you have already, just in case you need to go back. Then you can alter your tables, you can add new ones, change the columns, and so on. Once you've done that, you need to go back and use the G tool, and you need to remodel. Remember, using the G tool, you need to actually create the model first, then the controller, and then the view. Then you can go and create the CRUD. Okay, it's important that you do it in that order, otherwise things go seriously wrong quickly. Don't forget, which some people often do, to recreate the controller. So in terms of improving or changing the existing database model, as I said, it's quite common to do this, so you need to be able to handle that eventuality. What I'd like you to do as an activity, if you are in groups that get together, 2 or more people, or individually if required, what I'd like you to do is modify the existing database model, and we would like you to build a property alert function. So this is rather much like Rightmove, where you can sign up for a property alert. So for example, you're interested in a 3-bedroom property in Middlesbrough between a particular price band, and you would like to receive emails if a new property that exhibits those characteristics comes onto the market. That will then fire an email to the user that's already registered for the alerts. So that's actually the function itself. But you need to represent that in a brand new table. So there's no table there at the moment that represents that. So you need to design a new table that could hold the data for the alerts. Once you've done that, you also need to try to draw the relations to the existing database tables. So let's just go back and have a look at the database table itself. So these are the database tables represented by the models. So we've got users, we've got vendors, we've got images, we've got properties. So we'd like a brand new table that holds property alerts. So you need to think about the type of data that you need to capture in order to provide that functionality. So some big hints here. You'll need to capture obviously the user's ID. You'll need to store data about the property that they're interested in. So for example, a price, postcode, and that will need to be stored as a separate table entity. So I'd like you to actually have a go at that, and you can actually define that on paper if you wanted to, or if you want to have a go electronically, that's fine as well. Once you've had a go, you can actually post that to me. If you email the database model modifications to me, I will provide you with some feedback on the modifications that you've made in order for you to then to actually go ahead and model it live in MySQL, and then to use the G tool from then on to actually create your CRUD. Okay, that concludes this session. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.